I knew something was wrong the moment the ground started shaking like a herd of caffeinated buffalo was stampeding across my farm. At first, I thought maybe one of my cows had finally bulked up enough to moonlight as a demolition vehicle, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of blaring pop music and drunken screaming, carried on the late afternoon breeze. Nothing says trouble quite like auto-tuned shouting and the thump of a subwoofer big enough to give birds heart attack. I dropped the bag of seed I was carrying and jogged toward the ridge at the edge of my south field, and that's when I saw it. A giant, tacky, neon-purple party bus, easily the size of a city dumpster on wheels, barreling straight through my wheat as if God had pressed fast forward on a frat house disaster movie. The bus didn't brake or slow down. It just tore through the tender green stalks I'd spent months nurturing, flattening rows in seconds. A giant vinyl sticker on its side read, "Birthday Queen," with glitter letters that caught the sunlight like a disco ball of doom. I didn't need a narrator or backstory to know exactly whose party bus this was. Karen. My neighbor. The one who believed property lines were a suggestion and everything she touched was hers by divine suburban decree. She was the reigning monarch of entitlement with a kingdom built on passive-aggressive Facebook posts and threats to call the HOA, despite the small detail that we didn't have an HOA out here. But Karen wasn't known to let reality interfere with her agenda. She lived on the other side of my land, in a house so aggressively beige it looked personally offended by joy. Her pride and joy was her daughter, Amber. Today happened to be Amber's sweet 16, which apparently required a bus big enough to transport a circus troupe, a music system loud enough to communicate with space stations, and exactly zero respect for boundaries. I sprinted downhill, my heart boiling with anger but my brain oddly calm, calculating. Years of small-town living had taught me that when dealing with a Karen, you never shout first. You observe. You wait. You give them every opportunity to hang themselves with the rope they insist on stealing from your barn. The bus finally stopped near the creek, its tires spinning and spraying mud everywhere like it was auditioning for a monster truck rally. The music stopped abruptly and the door swung open with a hiss like a mechanical sigh of regret. Out stumbled a pack of teenagers dressed like a mall clothing display during a clearance sale explosion. Sequins, sparkles, and confusion everywhere. Karen strutted out next, wearing a sequin jacket and sunglasses the size of saucers, as if she were a backup dancer in a music video no one asked for. She planted her hands on her hips and surveyed the field she'd just defiled like a queen claiming new land. "This is perfect," she announced. "Amber, honey, your photo shoot will look so rustic." Rustic. That was her word for the destruction of thousands of rupees worth of wheat and an entire afternoon's peace. Amber emerged, taking selfies faster than a hummingbird flaps its wings. She barely looked up, more concerned about getting likes than noticing she was standing in the wreckage of someone else's livelihood. I approached slowly, breathing through the urge to shout. "Hey Karen," I called out. "What in the screaming neon disco is going on here?" Karen glanced at me over her sunglasses like I was a bothersome extra interrupting her film set. "We're just taking a few pictures," she said, with the tone of someone explaining something very simple to a very stupid child. "It's Amber's birthday. You should be honored that we chose your little farm." Honored. There was that entitlement again, delivered so casually it almost sounded harmless. Behind her, two boys climbed onto the bus roof to do some kind of celebratory dance that looked like wobbly penguins trying to escape a slip-and-slide. The bus creaked ominously under their weight. I gestured toward the flattened wheat. "You drove a bus through my field." She waved her hand dismissively like she was shooing away a fly. "It's just grass." Not grass. Months of work, irrigation, carefully timed planting, and my income for the season. But logic wasn't the currency Karen dealt in. Entitlement was, and she printed it fresh every morning. "You could have just asked," I said, keeping my voice steady. Calm. "Colder than ice in January." "I would have told you no," Karen replied with a bright smile, as if she were doing me the courtesy of honesty. Amber deserves the perfect day. Amber rotated slowly like a confused satellite, capturing every angle of her rustic debut, while teenagers splashed vodka from a bottle shaped like a flamingo. The bus driver, a sweaty guy with a backwards hat and a mullet fighting for its last breath, leaned against the door smoking and marveling at his life choices. I stepped beside Karen, staring straight at her. "You need to move the bus. Now." She laughed. Not a polite laugh. A loud, barking, "I am the protagonist and you are a background tree" laugh. "Don't be dramatic, farmer boy. It's a party. Lighten up." There it was, the shove. The moment entitlement becomes open hostility. I felt the gears click into place inside me. The long game had begun. "All right," I said softly. "Have your party. Just know you're trespassing. And you're responsible for the damage." Karen leaned in, her perfume a chemical attack. "You can send me the bill," she said. "I know a lawyer, you know. He's very good at shutting down fake complaints." The sun dipped lower, painting the field gold as the party ramped up. Music thundered again. Teens trampled more wheat. Karen popped champagne and sprayed it over everything like this was Versailles. And I walked away, calm. Because in my barn sat a very particular piece of equipment, an old disc harrow with steel blades sharp enough to turn soil into obedient rows. And coincidentally, also sharp enough to shred rubber into confetti. I wasn't going to damage anything. I wasn't going to touch the bus. But my fields? They were mine to work. As I disappeared over the ridge, I heard Karen yell, "Don't worry, guys. He's harmless." If only she understood how wrong she was. I wasn't harmless. I was patient. And patience is the deadliest weapon a farmer can wield. She drove her bus into my world without permission. And she had no idea what she'd just started. I spent the first 5 minutes after leaving the field pacing in the barn, the way you do when your brain is cycling through every possible response from count backward from 10 like a responsible adult, to introduce that bus to agriculture in the most direct way possible. The harrow sat in the corner, steel discs glinting under the rafters, looking like a medieval torture device with a union card in the farming industry. Each blade was built to cut deep, turn soil, and leave behind neat, obedient rows. It was not designed for vengeance. It just excelled at it. But the true genius of revenge isn't improvisation. It's preparation. You don't react to a Karen. You lure her further into the trap she doesn't know she's already built. So I let them party. I let them dance, scream, spill drinks, and trample value with every wobbly teenage step. I returned to the house, grabbed a notebook, and began writing down everything. The stolen land use, the flattened wheat, the bus plate number, the name of the party company plastered across its back, and even the exact time each new act of stupidity occurred. I wasn't just going to punish them. I was going to document them into oblivion. From my window, I watched the show like a wildlife documentary about destructive, glitter-covered animals in their unnatural habitat. Karen was the lead alpha, shrieking at teens to pose with their legs, just right for the perfect photo. Amber changed outfits 3 times. The boys on the roof started jumping so aggressively that I swear I saw the bus suspension filing paperwork to quit. Someone lit a flare, which is always a good sign a party is about 15 minutes away from making the 6 o'clock news. Around sunset, Karen finally noticed I was no longer standing there simmering in silence. She spotted me by the barn door and marched all the way across the field, her stilettos sinking and wobbling with every self-entitled step. She looked offended that nature refused to cooperate with her footwear choices. Stopping a few feet away, she crossed her arms, tilting her head like a hawk trying to decide if it should eat its prey or lecture it first. "You are being extremely rude," she announced, as if I had been the one driving a nightclub on wheels into her property. I raised an eyebrow. Rude. That was her crisis word. Not trespassing. Not destruction. Rude. She jabbed a manicured finger toward the party. "This is for Amber. She has had a difficult year, so we are celebrating big. Your field is the only place that fits the theme." I almost admired that level of delusion. My field was the theme. Dirt and crop. Rustic depression with a side of bankruptcy. Perfect for a teenager who had probably never even loaded a dishwasher. I answered with a calmness that irritated her immediately. I am not stopping you. I am letting you have your fun. Her eyes narrowed. Good. Then stop staring like some kind of creep and be grateful we are making your farm look lively. It was honestly hilarious. Karen could have committed arson while holding a banner that said "Look what I did," and she would still blame the nearest innocent bystander. I gave her a polite nod and a small smile, the kind that lets a tyrant believe they have won something even when they are walking straight into their own downfall. She strutted away like she had conquered a territory, while I returned to my barn and climbed onto my tractor. There is something incredibly grounding about turning a key and feeling an engine roar beneath you. A reminder that while city Karens played pretend royalty, out here power came in diesel form. I hitched the Harrow to the back, and as the blades locked into place, I felt the kind of satisfaction poets write about when they are being dramatic about farming equipment. Night came quickly, and with night came teenage chaos. Flashing phone lights. Bass so loud I assumed we would have deaf crows in the morning. Laughter that sounded like it was desperately trying to escape the throats producing it. And the party bus, still parked in the field, its tires half buried in mud thanks to its earlier performance in off-roading stupidity. That was when two of the boys got an idea. I could see it form between them like a spark in a vacuum. One pointed to my irrigation ditch. The other nodded like he had just been handed the cure to boredom. They charged the bus door and a moment later engines revved again. The lights flickered to life, and the bus slowly rolled forward as if it were preparing for an encore performance. It dawned on me that they planned to drive deeper into my field. Probably for cooler photos. Because nothing says glamorous birthday like sinking a 40-foot party bus into waterlogged soil. The driver, likely having consumed more flamingo-shaped vodka than recommended for someone controlling a multi-ton vehicle, revved and swore and spun wheels until the soil churned into muck. The rear tires sank deeper, the chassis groaned, and the undercarriage kissed earth with a metallic shriek of bad decisions. Karen could have taken that as a sign from the universe, a gentle whisper of stop. But Karen did not do whispers. She stormed up to the driver window, slapped the side, and ordered him to keep going. And he did, because there are two kinds of people in the world. Those who resist Karen and those who fear her wrath more than they fear physic. I saw them trying to push the bus. Teens shoving the steel giant, slipping and falling, each one learning the hard way that mud does not care about birthday outfit. Karen yelled at them like a coach whose paycheck depended on a hopeless team. Amber filmed the entire thing for her followers, believing this was victory because she was smiling while destruction happened. While they pushed and cursed and dug themselves deeper in every sense, I maneuvered the tractor slowly. The engine rumbled like thunder rolling across the plains. I steered toward the opposite side of the field, pretending to do something productive, letting them believe I did not care. The Harrow blades glinted under the moonlight like they were eager for the taste of rubber. I was a few hundred feet away, but close enough that the shape and possibility of vengeance filled the night. Finally the bus stopped moving entirely. It was stuck. And Karen, sweaty and furious, decided the correct target for her anger was me. She stomped toward the tractor, waving her arms like malfunctioning helicopter blade. "You need to pull us out now," she barked. "This is your fault. Your soil is too soft. You have to help." Her ability to declare ownership over resources, then demand service from the person she had wronged, was incredible. Not admirable. Just incredible. I shut the engine off and stepped down, wiping my hands on my jeans. Help you? After you drove a bus across property you don't own. After flattening a chunk of my income. After calling me rude for looking at the disaster you created. She didn't even hesitate. Yes. You are the farmer. Do your job. There it was. The crown jewel of entitlement. My job. To serve her. I smiled. That slow kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. Of course I will help. Her relief was instant and stupid. But not tonight. Her face froze. Confusion, disbelief, and anger fought for control of her expression. Tomorrow morning, I said, as calmly as reading a grocery list. After you pay for access, and after I finish working the field. We are not staying here all night. She screamed it like she believed screaming made things true. I gestured to the stuck bus. Looks like you are. But don't worry. In the morning, I will make sure the ground is nice and turned. She didn't understand yet. She didn't grasp what harrowing a field meant. But she would. The harrow blades glimmered in the starlight behind me like a promise. She had come onto my land with no permission. Tomorrow, she would learn what it felt like when the land pushed back. Karen did not take the news well. She shouted every threat she could craft under the influence of champagne, rage, and total disconnect from reality. She tried shouting about laws she didn't understand, property rights she didn't have, and contacts in the police force who absolutely did not care about her daughter's birthday. Meanwhile, the bus remained stuck like it had sprouted root. The teens huddled inside, shivering as the night chill crept in and the novelty of a party bus adventure evaporated into misery. Engines off. Music silent. Batteries draining. The only light came from phones clutched like life rafts in a sea of bad decisions. I returned to the farmhouse and slept like a man whose plan was unfolding smoother than churned butter. Morning arrived crisp and cold, a clean slate that smelled like dew and inevitability. I brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead or at least make a Karen reconsider her life choices. Then I grabbed my camera. Evidence wasn't optional, it was the backbone of justice. By the time I reached the field, the sun was climbing, painting the disaster in vivid detail. Mud splashed all the way up the bus panels. The vinyl "Birthday Queen" sticker was now peeling at one corner like even it wanted to escape. The field bore tire trenches deep enough to bury small appliances. Karen emerged from the bus the moment she saw me, hair frizzy, makeup smeared, and an expression like she had been forced to sleep in nature, which she had. "Finally," she screeched, stomping toward me. "You're going to pull us out right now or I will have your farm condemned. My lawyer is on standby." She did not have a lawyer. She had a Facebook friend who once attended a courtroom for jury duty and came out calling herself a law expert. I sipped my coffee, deeply enjoying the taste of her panic mixed with my caffeine. "Before anything moves," I said, lifting my camera, "we need to document all the damage." Her face twitched like a dropped puppet. "Are you serious?" "Very," I replied, snapping photos of rutted soil, crushed wheat, and the muddy tire that was about to become the protagonist of a very expensive repair bill. As I worked, she trailed behind me like a furious storm cloud, demanding explanations. "You are wasting valuable time," she barked. "Amber has brunch at noon." I almost laughed. Priorities. Brunch above everything. Amber poked her head out of the bus door, wrapped in a sparkly blanket, appearing as though her suffering was the greatest tragedy since electricity went out during a makeup tutorial. "Mom," she whined, "I haven't posted my morning photo." Absolute catastrophe. After I finished documenting the destruction, I walked to the tractor and fired up the engine. Karen's relief was instantaneous. She clapped her hands like she had trained me at last. "Finally, some cooperation," she shouted. I waved her off with one finger, which she assumed was a signal of compliance. It was not. The tractor lurched forward, the harrow clinking behind like a beast waking up with steel teeth. Karen hesitated. "What are you doing?" "Working my field," I called over the engine. I angled toward the wheat, toward the deep tracks that stabbed across my livelihood. The goal was simple. Fix the soil, restore order, and let fate place the bus exactly where the harrow blades wanted it. The bus sat directly across the direction I needed to work. I slowed just enough for Karen to realize the alignment. Her eyes widened in a dawning "oh no he won't, but maybe he will" epiphany. She sprinted toward me, waving both arms like she was trying to land a plane. "Stop. You're going to hit the bus." Then tell the driver to move it, I shouted back. He can't. It's stuck. Not my problem, I replied, shifting gears and continuing. Mud churned as the steel discs sliced the ground into neat, symmetrical rows. The rumble of machinery was like an approaching thunderstorm, unavoidable and indifferent to Karen's entitlement. I got closer. 50 feet. 30 feet. 20. Karen stood in front of the tractor, yelling something I couldn't hear over the engine. She wasn't used to being ignored. It terrified her. She jumped aside when she realized I wasn't slowing down. The discs scraped the edges of the ruts left by the bus, slicing away the loose mud that had trapped the tires. And then it happened. The soil shifted, gravity stepped in, and the bus sagged lower on the left side until the tire made intimate contact with the first blade. A hiss like a dragon exhaling shot across the field. The tire deflated instantly, collapsing as if it had surrendered to inevitability. Karen screamed, a raw, primal sound like someone witnessing the end of her reign. Teenagers shrieked from inside the bus like the vehicle had been attacked by wolves. The bus tilted awkwardly as rubber peeled back from the rim like wet cardboard. The driver opened the door and shouted something very adult but very useless. Karen sprinted up to the side of the bus, pounding on it as if she could force the tire to regrow. "You did this! You destroyed a child's birthday!" She spun and pointed at me like a witch calling down a curse. "You're paying for that tire. And the towing. And my emotional distress." I parked the tractor and stepped down, leaning against the wheel like a man perfectly comfortable with choices made. "You drove onto my property without permission," I said. "You destroyed my crops. You refused to leave. You threatened me. And now your bus is stuck even deeper." She sputtered like an engine choking on glitter. "You could have helped." I shrugged. "I am helping. I'm fixing my field." The truth slowly seeped into her skull. She had no leverage left. Her phone buzzed, and I could hear her side of a frantic call to the party bus company. Apparently, they were not thrilled about retrieving a bus from private farmland. The driver paced, muttering about his job and how he did not sign up for Karen-based emergencies. Meanwhile, the teens spilled out of the bus, looking like raccoons after a trash bin explosion. Mud smeared their designer shoes. Sequins dulled in the daylight. The reality of consequences, true consequences, hung over them like a cloud ready to rain life lessons. One of the boys tried to yank the flat tire off with his bare hand. He might as well have tried pulling a building out of its foundation. "Hey," I called to him. "Touch the Harrow blades and you'll lose more than a manicure." That warning alone saved him from amputating fingers he seemed fond of. Karen returned with renewed fury, thrusting her phone in my face. "The company says you have to release their property immediately." I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the moment. "I will," I said. "After payment for damages. And after a towing company removes it safely." "You can't hold us hostage," she shrieked. "I'll call the sheriff." "Please do," I replied. "I'll gladly show him the footage." I nodded to the camera still around my neck. She froze again. For the first time, fear, not entitlement, showed on her face. Not fear of me. Fear of being proven wrong. Fear of consequences having receipt. It was delicious. The fields stretched around us silent and judgmental. The party had died. The hangover had begun. Karen looked at the bus. At the torn tire. At the destroyed wheat she had called just grass. This wasn't rustic aesthetic anymore. It was an expensive mistake. And we were only halfway through the morning. The sheriff arrived faster than I expected. Maybe boredom works like a beeper out here, summoning law enforcement anytime a Karen reaches maximum volume. His cruiser rolled up the driveway, dust trailing behind like a comet tail. I met him halfway, hands in my pockets, calm enough to sip another coffee if I had one. Karen ran to him first, of course, because in her mind the first storyteller wins. She unleashed a frantic monologue, words colliding into each other. Criminal, kidnapped, trapped, sabotage, emotional abuse, endangered minors, and the piece de resistance, terrorism against a party bus. The sheriff, bless his long-suffering soul, listened without a single interruption, hands resting casually on his belt like this was just Tuesday, and he'd seen worse. When she finally inhaled, he raised a finger calmly toward me. "Mind telling me your version?" he asked. I kept my voice measured, like explaining the weather. "They drove a commercial vehicle through my field without permission, destroyed part of this year's wheat crop, and got stuck. I let them stay the night instead of calling law enforcement immediately. This morning, while repairing the field, one of the blades contacted a tire already half buried in mud." Karen tried to interrupt. The sheriff held up his palm, silencing her mid-scream. "Let him finish." That alone almost made the whole ordeal worth it. I handed him my camera and phone with documented timestamps, video of their arrival, and photos of the damage. He took his time scrolling through. Karen hovered anxiously, flapping her arms like a hummingbird made of fury and hairspray. The longer he examined the evidence, the quieter she became. Silence did not suit her. He snapped the camera strap closed and handed the evidence back. "Well," he said, turning toward Karen, "looks like you trespassed." The word hit her like being slapped with a dictionary. "But we had no choice," she shrieked. "This farmer is hoarding land he isn't even using." The sheriff's eyebrow arched, a silent, glorious judgment. "Ma'am, that's not how private property works." She stomped. "He refused to help. He's trying to destroy the bus." "Actually," the sheriff countered, "he's working his field. And you're blocking his ability to do so." Amber began crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks like war paint melting. "Mommy, please fix this," she whined. Karen straightened her spine as if emotional posture alone could resurrect her right. "You have to force him to tow us out," she demanded. The sheriff gave her a long, tired look. "I'm not forcing a landowner to provide free labor because you committed trespass." She opened her mouth again. He cut her off. "You will need a professional tow company. On your dime." The driver, who had been lurking behind the bus pretending he didn't exist, stepped closer and let out a relieved sigh. "Thank God someone is being reasonable," he muttered. Karen whirled on him. "Don't you dare talk back to me. This is your fault for listening to these ignorant kids." The driver blinked slowly, the universal expression of a man rewriting his life choices. Sheriff Barnes continued, explaining legal options with the energy of a teacher who knows the student won't pass the class. "You'll also be responsible for crop damage. He has clear documentation." Karen gasped like she'd been stabbed, not physically, but in the wallet. This was the moment she finally realized consequences were not mythical creatures. They were real, and they'd shown up with paperwork. But desperation is the last stage before full meltdown. Karen clung to a final flimsy thread. "I don't have the money for a giant farm bill," she cried. "You can't take everything I have just because my daughter needed a special birthday." The sheriff gestured toward the bus. "Ma'am, that is a luxury vehicle." "It's a rental," she corrected angrily. "A very expensive rental." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Then maybe you should consider an attitude rental as well." I nearly laughed. Nearly. But I stayed silent, arms crossed, face neutral. Calm is a powerful weapon. The sheriff turned to me. "Do you need them removed from the property immediately?" It was a tempting offer. I imagined a tow truck yanking that purple monster out while Karen flailed. But there was still a lesson she needed to learn, one that required time and discomfort. "As long as they cooperate and complete full payment for damages," I said evenly, "I'm willing to let them stay until the tow arrives." Karen stared like she couldn't believe I wasn't the villain in her story anymore. I had just offered mercy, something she didn't understand how to process. "Thank you," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. He stepped closer so only I could hear. "If she causes you more trouble, call me." He said it like a man who enjoyed watching justice unfold slowly. Once the sheriff left, The bus crowd turned feral with boredom and unrest. Teens wandered around the field, complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi like civilization itself was crumbling. One boy tried climbing a fence to get a photo of a cow. The cow headbutted the fence once, and he screamed like he'd been attacked by a bear. Natural selection doing community service. Karen alternated between yelling at the bus driver, berating Amber for not acting grateful enough, and pacing in circles muttering about lawyers she didn't have. Every minute the bus remained stuck, the weight of her choices pressed harder. The driver called his company again. They had finally secured a tow truck, but estimated arrival was late afternoon. 6 hours. 6 hours of Karen stewing in humiliation. 6 hours of teens learning mud is not a fashion accessory. 6 hours of Amber discovering that even influencers can lose followers when their battery dies. Meanwhile, I kept working. Tractor forward, blades cutting neat lines through soil, restoring what she had ruined. Every pass got me closer to where the bus sat, more tires kissing the threshold of danger. The driver now stood guard like a man protecting a very large and vulnerable animal from a predator armed with agricultural engineering. Karen kept demanding I avoid the bus entirely, but the truth was simple. The field needed consistent rows. If the machine hit something in its rightful path, that wasn't my fault. That was geography, and gravity, and poetic justice dressed as farming. Around noon, Karen approached, calmer only because screaming had lost its impact. Her voice dropped to something almost human. "How much do you want?" she asked. It wasn't a question of affordability, it was denial battling reality. I listed the damages based on market value: destroyed wheat, soil compaction, emergency replanting labor. The number made her visibly sway. "That's robbery," she whispered. "That's business," I replied. Amber stomped toward us, pointing a shaking phone at me. "I'm going to film you abusing us," she threatened weakly. The phone's screen was black. Battery dead. She realized it and shrieked like a kettle boiling over. By mid-afternoon, silence replaced outrage. No more shouting. No selfies. Just shivering regret. The bus driver sat smoking on a rock, staring into the distance like a veteran who'd seen too much. The teens huddled near the bus door, trying to stay out of the wind. Karen stood alone, arms wrapped around herself, her once flashy jacket now smeared with earth, reality refusing to let her pretend anymore. Cracked entitlement makes a specific sound when it falls apart. You can't hear it with your ears, it happens behind the eyes. She looked across the field at me. I nodded once. A simple acknowledgement that decisions have prices. She looked away quickly. When the tow truck's rumble finally echoed through the fields, everyone exhaled like prisoners hearing keys jingle. But this wasn't rescue yet. This was the beginning of the bill. And the field still had one more bite left in it before the bus would leave. The tow truck driver stepped out looking like a man who had seen every variety of human stupidity and charged extra for it. He surveyed the scene. The trench-like tire ruts, the busted wheat, a glittery purple bus lodged like a whale in quicksand, and Karen standing there trying to look powerful despite being covered in mud and day-old panic. He pulled a form from his clipboard and whistled low. "This is gonna cost a fortune," he announced, not without admiration. Karen's face went the color of cold oatmeal. Amber perked up briefly, believing salvation had finally arrived. "Good," she snapped. "Get us out of here so I can go to my brunch." The driver raised an eyebrow. "Brunch ended about 4 hours ago, princess." Amber wilted like a flower in direct heat. The driver and his assistant began setting heavy chains and braces around the bus. The Harrow had taken one tire. The mud still gripped the others like a toddler refusing to release a favorite toy. The tow team discussed angles and leverage, while Karen hovered like a drone powered solely by anxiety. I stayed silent, perched on the tractor seat, watching nature administer consequences. There's a special satisfaction in witnessing karma show up carrying a toolbox. Karen eventually stormed up to me again, arms crossed like a child protecting a crayon collection. I hope you're happy, she spat. My daughter's birthday is ruined. I gave her a brief shrug. Your daughter's birthday is the least ruined thing here. She blinked, confused by a comeback that didn't play by her script. Before she could reply, the tow driver signaled to start the pull. The winch roared to life and the chain tightened, dragging the bus forward by brute force. Mud splashed in arcs as the rear wheels spun helplessly. The driver pressed the pedal inside, trying to help the tow truck's efforts. But the bus resisted, anchored deep by last night's arrogance. The tow operator adjusted the truck's position, angling upward to gain more force. The bus lifted slightly, metal groaning like it was complaining about its owner's decision-making skills. Then came the moment I had quietly predicted. The bus suddenly lurched forward in short bursts. The front wheels gained traction. Cheers erupted from the teenagers, the first sign of joy in hours. Karen clasped her hands dramatically under her chin, like she was praying to the god of expired credit cards. The tow operator grinned with pride. Almost home free, he muttered. He spoke too soon. As the bus crept forward, its path brought it exactly over a patch of soil I had worked with the Harrow just an hour before, rows freshly cut into narrow, hidden ridges of steel-edged earth. The rear right wheel rolled directly across one of the discs lying slightly raised beneath the mud. A sharp, metallic kiss, a quick slice, and then, boom. The second tire exploded like a gunshot. Rubber whipped outward and the bus lurched violently to one side. Amber screamed like she'd been thrown into a zombie apocalypse. Karen wailed loud enough to startle crows into flight. Even the tow driver jumped back, yelling something that sounded a lot like, "Not again." The bus slumped unevenly, now deadweight. The tow operator stared at the ruined tire, then up at me, then back at the tire again. He wiped his forehead with disbelief. "Well," he said slowly, "that just added another zero." Karen collapsed onto her knees, clutching the earth as if the ground itself had betrayed her. "You did this! You absolute monster! Do you enjoy watching us suffer?" she screeched. I dismounted the tractor and walked toward her, each step deliberate. The teens watched wide-eyed, like witnesses to a showdown between reality and a villain who thought she was the hero. I stopped a few feet away. "Enjoy? No. I'm simply doing exactly what I told you I'd do. Working my field." She shook her head wildly. "You could have moved that stupid contraption," she cried, pointing at the Harrow. "You put those blades there on purpose." "I put them there yesterday," I corrected evenly. "Long before your party bus auditioned for a tractor pull competition." Her rage hit a new note, a shrill, panicked desperation. "You think this is funny?" she screamed. "You think you've won? Well, guess what? My husband will pay for all of this and then he'll sue you for emotional damages. We will take your land and build a mall on it." There it was. The real Karen surface burst. Not rustic photo shoot Karen. Not screaming at teens Karen. This was suburban invasion Karen, the one already mentally bulldozing my barn for her parking lot. I didn't flinch. "You're welcome to try," I said, voice low as thunder without the flash. "But first you need to settle today's bill." The tow driver backed me up with a nod. "Yeah, lady. You owe for both tires, the extraction labor, the damage waivers, and the rush service fee." He pointed to his paperwork. "And I'm not loading this thing onto my truck until I see proof of payment." Karen blinked in horror. "You expect me to pay you here? In the dirt? Like some peasant?" "Cash card or transfer," he replied. "Peasants prefer cash." Amber sobbed into her sequins, terrified of the world where money doesn't magically appear just because you pout in the right direction. The teens shuffled awkwardly, clearly questioning whether the birthday girl's mom was actually a supervillain or just deeply incompetent. The driver leaned against the bus and shrugged. "Sorry folks, guess we're camping here a bit longer." Karen glared at me with a hatred so strong it could power a small appliance. "You think you're so clever," she whispered. I tilted my head. "Oh no. I know I am." She stood, brushed mud off her knees, and pointed at me like a prophet revealing doom. This isn't over. You wait. You wait and see what happens when the right people hear about this. I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. Calm. Cold. The sheriff already heard. And fun fact, there are no wrong people who will take your side when you've recorded yourself trespassing, destroying crops, ignoring warnings, and refusing to pay damages. That crushed her more than the tire blowout did. She looked back at the bus, at her daughter, at her shrinking army of teenagers. And for the first time, her voice quivered. Please, just help us leave. Not authoritative, not threatening, just exhausted. I turned away. I'll continue working the field. Tow company can handle the extraction when payment clears. Her voice cracked again. We don't have the money until my husband arrives. I stopped and smiled, because that was the final twist falling perfectly into place. Oh, I said softly, then we wait. Hours passed. The bus sat wounded, sunlight glaring off the tacky purple vinyl like judgment from the sky itself. Amber cried until she fell asleep. Teens sat in the dirt, tired of complaining. Karen paced in tiny circles, each lap another loop of regret strangling her pride. Evening rolled in with cool wind. The bus driver handed her his phone. Your husband finally answered, he said. Karen shot me a murderous glance before stepping away to beg through the receiver. I didn't listen to the words. I didn't need to. I could tell by her posture. She had just learned her husband wasn't bailing her out. Not financially. Not legally. Not emotionally. Her empire was shrinking by the minute. And tomorrow morning, when the bank opened, she'd have no choice left but the last one she ever wanted. Submission. Karen didn't sleep much that night. I could see her pacing through the bus windows every time I checked from the porch. She looked like a general who had lost the war but refused to accept the terms of surrender. Meanwhile, I slept like a rock. The kind of sleep you earn when you didn't make any disastrous life choices recently. When dawn rolled in again, the bus still sat hunched in the middle of the field like a purple carcass left behind by a very incompetent predator. Dew glistened on the ripped tires and the glittery vinyl, making it look like a sad parade float from a holiday no one celebrates. The teens were finally quiet, phones dead, rebellion drained. They no longer looked like party royalty. They looked like kids who desperately wanted breakfast and a shower. Karen approached while I was sipping coffee on the porch step. The wind tousled her hair into a chaotic crown. Her eyes were swollen, not from beauty sleep, that was certain. Her voice came out low, the first sign of humility she'd displayed since tearing onto my land like a glitter hurricane. My husband said, she began with a swallow, he's not paying for the damages. He's furious we used the bus at all. He's furious I involved police. He's furious about the cost. He says I need to fix this myself. I nodded slowly, holding the mug with both hands to hide how satisfying this was. That sounds like a mature consequence, I said. Karen stiffened as if maturity was a contagious disease. He also said, I need to apologize. That word seemed to physically hurt her. She stared at the ground, searching for some loophole that would let her avoid saying it. I'm sorry you feel. She paused as my eyebrow shot up. She regrouped. I'm sorry we trespassed and caused damage. It wasn't heartfelt, but it was recorded by the universe anyway. Amber, wrapped in a blanket of lost hope, trudged up behind her mother. We're sorry, she mumbled, face buried in humiliation. The apology landed heavier coming from her. She wasn't born bad, she had been handed a terrible script to follow. Maybe this experience was the rewrite. I stood and walked a few steps closer, the grass crunching under my boot. Karen's eyes flicked up in a mixture of fear and hatred and just a hint of realization. There's still the issue of payment, I said. She nodded stiffly. I will wire you the money once the bank opens. For everything. Her voice cracked, but she finished the sentence. That alone was progress. Good, I replied. Then I'll authorize the tow. Her relief spilled out in a shaky exhale. The bus driver overheard and fist-pumped weakly. The teens groaned with gratitude, a choir of broken spirits. At 8:01 a.m., Karen made the transfer. I watched the numbers appear in my account, each one a tiny, beautiful trophy. It was enough to cover the wheat, the soil repair, and then some, because respecting boundaries is cheaper than defying them. Karma has a calculator and charges interest. The tow truck returned, chains clanking like a jailer arriving with release papers. This time, everyone held their breath. Slowly the bus lifted, mud sucking at it desperately, like the field itself wanted one last bite. The tow driver adjusted tension and angle until the purple beast yawned free from the earth's grip. Cheers didn't erupt. No celebration. Just a collective sigh from souls tired of learning and tired of Karen. The bus driver started the engine, which coughed like a smoker on his first jog in years. The teens climbed aboard, too defeated to post anything even if their phones worked again. Karen lingered near me while the bus repositioned. She stared out at the rows of soil, straight lines of order cutting through the chaos she'd brought. "This is just a field to you," she said quietly. "Just dirt." I looked at her, really looked. Under the layers of entitlement and hairspray, she was just a person terrified of losing control. "This field is food," I said. "It's my work, my pride, my history. You don't have to love it. Just respect that it matters." She swallowed again, a tiny swallow of something resembling understanding. "I didn't think. I noticed," I replied. The bus was ready to leave. The tow driver signaled the all clear. Karen took a step toward it, but I lifted a hand. She stopped, nervous she'd tripped another invisible law. "One more thing," I said. "We need a written statement. A signed document saying you won't set foot on my property again without permission." Her face twisted into a last flash of indignation, but then she remembered the sheriff, the bill, the humiliation, and she nodded. "Fine." She signed the paper with trembling hands, her autograph the symbol of a dethroned tyrant. Amber trudged past, avoiding eye contact, learning more in the last 24 hours than she had in any birthday party before. "Hey," I said softly. She looked up. "Your photos actually turned out nice," I said, nodding toward the patches of sunrise-lit wheat still intact. Her cheeks flushed pink, not embarrassment this time, but a shy sort of gratitude. "Thanks," she whispered. Karen finally stepped onto the bus and paused in the doorway. Her last attempt at dignity came out in a single sentence. "You're a very petty man." I smiled. "Generous, actually. I could have called the sheriff last night." She had no comeback. The door hissed closed. The bus rolled forward slowly, like a dog leaving the vet's office, exhausted and in need of a long nap. The teens stared out the windows, faces filled with lesson-shaped silence. As the bus reached the road, the glittery "Birthday Queen" decal peeled off completely and fluttered away, nature finishing the job of stripping her of her crown. Peace returned like a curtain falling. The field, though wounded, stood strong. The tractor waited, ready to finish the restoration. The sun rose higher, a spotlight on the truth. Entitlement may enter loudly, but it leaves quietly, when the ground itself pushes back. I walked the boundary line where the bus had first entered. The crushed wheat would regrow, nourishment rising stronger than before. The field always heals when given time and respect. People can too, if they're willing. Karen? Maybe. One day. Probably after several more expensive birthdays. I climbed onto the tractor again, hands resting on the wheel. The engine hummed like a patient old friend. I drove forward, the Harrow trailing, turning earth into neat order once more. Crows circled above, gossiping about the spectacle they'd watched. Behind me, tire marks vanished under fresh soil. Ahead of me, rows stretched clean and endless. And in the quiet rhythm of reclaiming my land, a single thought settled comfortably. She came here thinking she owned the world. But this field reminded her. On a farm, the land decides who's queen.